Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. I'm Jennifer, and sitting right here with me is Tom. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest struggles English learners face, thinking in English instead of translating everything in your head.
That's right. If you've ever felt like your brain is acting like a slow translation machine, taking a question in English, translating it into your language, building an answer, then translating it back again, this episode is for you. We've both been through that pain, and today we're going to share stories, mistakes, and powerful techniques to break free from translation.
And before we dive in, we want you to join the conversation. Drop a comment below right now. Do you usually translate in your head when you speak English? Just type yes or no. We want to see how many of you are still stuck in translation mode.
When I first started learning Spanish, I thought translation was the only way. I remember sitting at a dinner table in Madrid, trying to keep up with the conversation. Someone would ask me a question, and I'd immediately hear it in Spanish, translate it into English in my head, build a sentence in English, and then try to put it back into Spanish. By the time I opened my mouth, everyone had already moved on to a new topic. It was like being stuck in slow motion while the whole world was in fast forward. That constant translating didn't just make me slow, it made me feel invisible.
That's exactly what I felt when I was studying French in Paris. One day, I sat at a cafe and the waiter asked me a super simple question. Avec du lait? Which just means with milk. But my brain froze. I thought, okay, avec means with, du lait means milk. By the time I pieced it together, I had panicked so much that I forgot the word yes in French. The waiter gave me a confused smile, switched to English, and in that moment, I felt like a tourist instead of a learner. That's the problem with translating. It builds walls between you and real conversations.
You know, the thing is, translating is natural in the beginning. Our brain uses our native language as a kind of support system, like scaffolding around a building. At first, you need that scaffolding. But if you never take it down, the house is never finished. Too many learners keep the scaffolding up for years, never daring to step away from translation.
Absolutely. And part of the blame goes to the way languages are taught in school. Think about it. Vocabulary lists are almost always one column of English words and one column of your native words. Grammar is explained in your own language. Teachers encourage you to memorize rules through translation. So from day one, your brain is programmed to believe this word equals that word. It's a habit that gets stronger and stronger. And like any bad habit, it feels comfortable, but it stops you from growing.
I'll never forget the first time I actually thought in Spanish without realizing it. It wasn't in class, it wasn't during homework, it was in a dream. I woke up and remembered that the whole dream was in Spanish. I had conversations, I argued, I even joked, and not once did I translate. That morning, I realized, fluency isn't about how many words you know. It's about training your brain to operate directly in the language.
For me, the breakthrough happened when I stopped caring about being perfect. I had been translating everything because I was terrified of making mistakes. But one evening, I went out with some French friends. I was too tired to translate. I just let words come out, broken and messy. And you know what? They understood me. They laughed at my jokes. They didn't care about the grammar mistakes, they cared about the conversation. That night I realized, when you think in English, you sound more confident, even if you're not perfect.
Translation can be dangerous, too. Once, I wanted to say I'm hungry in Spanish, but I translated it word for word and ended up saying something that meant I'm pregnant. The waiter's face was priceless. Everyone laughed, and I felt like crawling under the table. That was the day I realized, translation isn't just slow, it can totally betray you.
Oh my gosh, I had almost the exact same experience. In French, I wanted to say, I'm excited, but I translated directly from English. In French, that phrase has a very, let's just say, very adult meaning. My friends burst out laughing, and I sat there turning bright red. That mistake taught me that translation creates false friends. The only way to avoid them is to think in the language itself.
One of the best techniques that helped me was labeling. I would look around my apartment and describe everything in English. This is my desk. My computer is on the desk. I'm writing an email. I didn't think, mesa equals desk. I just connected the object directly to the English word. Over time, my brain stopped reaching for Spanish and started grabbing English automatically.
My favorite technique is shadowing. I'd put on a podcast, play a YouTube video, or even listen to a movie scene. Then I'd repeat what the speaker said immediately, like their shadow. At first, it felt impossible because my mouth couldn't keep up. But shadowing forced my brain to think and my mouth to move in English simultaneously. It's uncomfortable at the beginning, but it's incredibly powerful.
Another underrated method is self-talk. I used to walk around my apartment talking to myself in English. I'm opening the fridge. I'm making coffee. I'm writing notes. My roommate thought I was crazy, but it worked. By narrating my actions, I practiced forming sentences in real time without pressure. It felt silly, but it trained my brain to think in English.
I did the same thing, but in the shower. I'd pretend I was giving a speech in French, even if it was just nonsense. Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about shampoo. It sounds ridiculous, but it helped me build fluency. When you talk to yourself, you remove the fear of judgment. That safe space gives you freedom to experiment.
A lot of people think immersion means moving abroad. But immersion can be created anywhere. I changed my phone to Spanish, watched TV without subtitles, listened to Spanish music on repeat. At first, it was frustrating. But after a few weeks, I started recognizing patterns. My brain had no choice but to adapt.
Same here. When I switched my phone to French, I was completely lost at first. I couldn't find my contacts, I didn't know where the settings were. But after 2 weeks, those words became normal. Suddenly, I knew settings, notifications, and battery in French without ever studying them. That's the magic of immersion, it sneaks into your brain.
You know, one thing that really changed how I approached learning was realizing that not all thoughts are in words. A lot of them are in images. For example, when I see a dog, I don't actually think dog first. I see the image of the animal, and only then does the word come. When I was learning Spanish, instead of saying, okay, perro equals dog, I started looking at an actual dog and saying, that's perro. I didn't let English get in the way. I connected the image directly with the Spanish word. That changed everything, because my brain started working like a child's brain, direct connection, no middleman.
That's so true. I used the same trick when I was learning French. I remember buying apples at a market. Instead of translating pomme equals apple, I held the apple in my hand and repeated pomme, pomme, pomme. I smelled it, touched it, tasted it, and linked it straight to the French word. No translation. That's exactly how children learn their first language. They don't say, oh, this sound means that in my mother tongue. They just absorb. Adults forget we can do the same thing.
Another big reason we translate in our heads is fear. We're afraid to make mistakes, so we hide behind our native language. I used to think, if I translate carefully, I'll sound smarter. But in reality, the opposite happened. I sounded robotic, like a bad Google Translate. Once I accepted that mistakes are part of the journey, I stopped translating so much. I told myself, fluency is messy. And people actually respect you more when you speak freely than when you freeze in silence.
Absolutely. I used to freeze up every time I wanted to speak French because I was terrified of sounding stupid. But I noticed something powerful. Whenever I forced myself to just speak without translating, people were patient. They helped me. They appreciated my effort. And many times, they even said my French sounded natural because I wasn't stuck in a grammar prison. Fear makes us cling to translation, but bravery sets us free.
For me, consistency was key. I made a rule, 10 minutes every day, I would think in Spanish. No English allowed in my head. I'd describe what I was doing, or I'd imagine fake conversations. Some days I was tired and my brain resisted. But after 2 months, it became easier. Thinking in English, or any language, is like a muscle. If you train it daily, it grows. If you don't, it stays weak.
I love that. I had a similar system. I made English-only hours for myself when I was practicing. For 1 hour, I didn't allow myself to think in Persian. If I didn't know a word, I would explain around it in English. For example, if I forgot scissors, I'd say, the thing you use to cut paper. That forced my brain to problem solve in English. It was uncomfortable at first, but that's where the growth happened.
One of the most effective things I did was force myself to speak with native speakers, even if it was just small talk. When I was in Spain, I'd go to a cafe and purposely ask the waiter questions in Spanish, even when I already knew the answer. What's in this sandwich? What time do you close? These tiny interactions trained my brain to stop translating, because there was no time for translation. Real life pushes you in ways textbooks never do.
I can totally relate. In France, I started conversations with shopkeepers about random things like the weather, or what kind of cheese they recommended. At first, it was terrifying, but then I noticed something. Those conversations were short, natural, and repeated often. After hearing and saying the same phrases again and again, my brain started recognizing patterns. That's when I stopped translating and started responding naturally.
Speaking of real life, let me tell you about my most embarrassing Spanish mistake. I once tried to say, I'm embarrassed, but I translated literally. The word I used actually meant, I'm pregnant. Imagine a man saying that in the middle of a serious conversation. Everyone burst out laughing. I was humiliated for a minute, but later I realized it was the best lesson. Translation tricks you into saying nonsense.
Oh my goodness, I had the same kind of disaster in French. I wanted to say, I'm excited to meet you, but I translated directly from English. The French phrase I used meant something very inappropriate, let's just say very romantic. The person looked shocked, and I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. But again, it taught me, stop translating, start thinking directly in the language.
After that embarrassing mistake, I realized I had two choices, either stay silent and safe, or speak, make mistakes, and learn. I chose the second option. And honestly, that decision changed everything. Every time I spoke without translating, I felt braver. I realized language isn't about being perfect, it's about being understood. And most of the time, people understood me just fine.
I had the same realization. At first, I wanted every French sentence to be flawless, so I kept translating and correcting myself in my head. But perfection was killing my progress. Once I allowed myself to make mistakes, my French improved much faster. I wasn't just learning words, I was building confidence. And confidence is the secret ingredient that makes you sound fluent.
I also discovered the power of changing my environment. I filled my apartment with English sticky notes on objects, posters with quotes, my phone and laptop set to Spanish. Every time I looked around, I saw the language. That constant exposure helped my brain think in Spanish automatically. You don't need to move abroad to create an English world, you can build one at home.
Yes! I used to put sticky notes all over my kitchen. Fridge, cupboard, spoon. It looked ridiculous, but it worked. Every time I reached for something, I said the word in French. Slowly, the translation chain disappeared. My brain didn't think spoon equals colère. It just thought colère. That's when you know you're really thinking in the language.
One of my favorite success moments was when I went to Spain again after a year of practice. I sat in a cafe, and the waiter asked me a question. Without realizing it, I answered immediately, in Spanish, no translation, no hesitation. Later, I thought about it and realized, my brain had switched to Spanish mode. That feeling was incredible, like I unlocked a new part of myself.
For me, the big success moment came when a French friend told me, "You don't sound like a foreigner who's translating. You sound natural." That compliment meant the world to me. It showed me that all the little daily practices, the shadowing, the self-talk, the immersion had paid off. Thinking in the language makes people forget you're a learner. They just see you as a communicator.
If I could give one piece of advice, it would be this: start small. Don't try to think in English for an hour right away. Start with 5 minutes. Describe your breakfast, your outfit, your plans for the day. Train your brain slowly, and gradually increase the time. Before you know it, you'll be spending half your day thinking in English without realizing it.
I'd add this: make it fun. If you force yourself, you'll quit. So turn it into a game. Pretend you're a YouTuber giving a review of your lunch in English. Imagine you're a reporter narrating your commute. I used to pretend I was giving a TED Talk in French about my cat. It sounds silly, but it kept me motivated. When language learning feels like play, your brain learns faster.
One challenge I faced when I tried to think in Spanish was boredom. Let's be honest, talking to yourself about what's in your fridge can get boring. At first, I almost gave up. But then I realized I needed to add variety. I started imagining scenarios like I was at a job interview, or on a date, or giving a speech. Suddenly, my brain had to stretch and come up with new words. It wasn't just, "this is my chair," it became, "here's how I'd convince a company to hire me." That kept the practice exciting and realistic.
That's such a good point. I felt the same with French. At the beginning, I kept repeating the same sentences. I am eating. I am walking. I am tired. It felt robotic. Then I started playing games with myself. For example, I would describe my day as if I were telling a story to a child, using simple words, but making it dramatic. Today, the brave Jennifer conquered the mountain of homework. It made me laugh, and more importantly, it made my brain enjoy the process.
Media saved me too. I remember watching Spanish soap operas, even though they were dramatic and over the top. I'd pause and mimic the actors, not just their words but their emotions. When someone shouted, "No me digas," I'd shout it too, with the same passion. It was silly, but it burned the phrases into my memory. Thinking in English gets easier when your brain connects words with feelings, not just with translations.
Yes, I did that with music in the language I was learning. I listened to songs again and again until the lyrics felt completely natural. Then I'd sing along, not caring if my voice sounded bad. Singing forces you to think in the rhythm of the language. Later, those same phrases would pop up in my daily thoughts. For example, I'd be walking to school, and suddenly my brain would start singing part of a song in that language without me even realizing it. That's when I knew the language was starting to live in my head.
The turning point for me came when I realized I wasn't translating anymore. I was on the subway in Madrid, and I overheard two people talking. I understood them instantly, without effort, without running to English in my mind. It shocked me. I thought, wait, I didn't translate. I just understood. That was the day I stopped calling myself a learner and started calling myself a speaker. Thinking in the language is what creates that shift in identity.
My turning point was a bit different. I was on the phone with a French friend, and we talked for almost an hour. When I hung up, I suddenly realized I hadn't used English in my head at all. The whole conversation flowed in French. I remember sitting there in silence, smiling like crazy, because I realized I had done it. I was actually thinking in another language. It felt like magic, but it was just the result of daily practice.
If I could leave our listeners with one piece of advice, it would be this: don't wait for the perfect moment to start thinking in English. Start today. Start small. Don't worry if it feels messy or if you don't know every word. The key is to train your brain little by little until English becomes the natural voice inside your head. Remember, fluency doesn't happen by accident, it's built one thought at a time.
And I'd add this: be patient and be kind to yourself. Thinking in English takes time. At first, your brain will resist, but if you keep going, one day you'll surprise yourself. You'll realize you just spent 10 minutes, or an entire conversation, thinking only in English, and it felt effortless. That's the moment you know you're becoming fluent. And before you leave, we want to hear from you. What's the funniest or most awkward mistake you've made while translating in your head? Share it in the comments. We can't wait to read your stories and laugh together.
Thank you for joining us today on the EnglishListening. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We've got some powerful topics coming up, like how to stop overthinking when you speak and how to sound more natural in conversations.
Remember to drop your stories in the comments. 90% of our listeners will relate to your experience, and your story might inspire someone else to finally let go of translation. Until next time, keep practicing, keep smiling, and most importantly, keep thinking in English.